Hello everyone, it's Jessica and I'm going to present my project for the semester over the worth of small towns. This has been something that's bothered me personally for years because I live in a small town and the perception of how my town is and how I'm going to be is usually very far from the actual reality of my life. A lot of people tend to believe that if you live in a small town, any issue with moving on in life is simply because of where you were born and not any outside powers that may be. And this has been noticeable for me very much so with college. And so I wanted to do more research into how people are looking at that. So why an interdisciplinary approach for this problem? Well, when deciding a place's worth, there are many different facets to that. And to get someone to spend their time and energy in a place, you have to really prove that. And so with small towns, a lot of people tend to just go for it's historical. But you also need to show that the current life, the current history that's being made is still important as well as what happened in the past. And so for me, with this one, that's why I decided to really choose history as a main focal point, sociology to sort of help analyze the photos I was taking, and then communication to bridge everything together and try to communicate through the photos what it was about Chilton that made it worthwhile. History as a perspective actually has 6 major theories, but I only used 3 that seem to really fit my research better. One of these is the geographic theory. This is the idea that where something takes place and where someone lived makes their history just that little bit different from somewhere else. So a small town in China is going to be different than a small town in Texas. The linear theory is the idea that time and history move in a linear fashion. This is opposite of the circular theory, which believes that everything kind of repeats in a very similar cycle. And then the everyman theory. This is the idea that it's not just the great people, the kings and lords that really decide history, but it's also down to the everyday person who is teaching or working in a field that makes history what it is. Sociology has 3 major theories, and I only used 2 to really help analyze the photos I was taking. The symbolic interactionist theory is the social and psychological dynamics of individuals interacting in small groups. So it's the way a certain group of people, not a whole society, will interact with symbols and words to make their own meaning. And then conflict theory is that society is composed of different groups and interests competing for power and resources. When you think of a small town, that may not be the first thing to come to mind, but if you live in Texas, for example, there are a lot of different churches, and they all need to get their people in the door and then get the funding to keep their projects going, for example. Communication has 5 major theories, and many of these contradict each other or build on each other, and so what I ended up using was 2 different theories that really seem to encapture how to communicate about a small town. One of these is systems theory. This is based on the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This is usually used with organizations, but when talking about a small town, you get the idea that even though there may be different neighborhoods, they all contribute to what makes that particular town its identity. And then human rules is the perspective that we follow shared rules of communication and not strict laws. So these are more dynamic than like a law of communication would allow for. And this is really where we get the deviation between what one group would understand from something that the other group might not. One of the first places I decided to look to see how Chilton as a community works together and makes that sociological sense of community, I went back to 2006 to a fire that destroyed our downtown. The buildings that had been there had been built in the 1890s, and what happened was there was a grease fire in a kitchen of a cafe, and it spread through the attic all along the connected buildings. And in this, our volunteer fire department really came through, but what really happened was that we had to call on 11 other area departments, many of them also volunteer in small town. And then the community also pulled together in that day and the days following during the cleanup because many of the firemen were getting dehydrated and they needed food because this fire took the entire day to put out. And then during the cleanup, there was bricks all over the road and there was objects from the community that had been stored in the safe of a bank that was there that needed to be organized and cleaned up and saved. And that day was not the only day that our fire department has really stepped up to be a central focus for our community. Every year there's also a barbecue fundraiser that the fire department does with brisket and sausage for Super Bowl Sunday. And we use this money to keep the station up and running and to get new equipment and new trucks as needed, because as a volunteer you do not really have the funds that a city department would. And you need to have someone there to keep the community safe. And then the last big thing that the fire department does each year is an annual bingo and auction. And both sides of the department really help. And what I mean by that is we have a women's auxiliary. And so that is all the wives and girlfriends and family members of the main firefighters that come in. And during this, they set up the kitchen. They are in there all day, and I've been able to help them a few times, and it is insane to see these older women, that some of them old enough to be my grandmother, in there every time we need them. And then the guys set up the actual bingo and auction, and this also takes all day because you have to organize the prizes and make sure we have everything we need. And then when the women's auxiliary needs help, they also step up for that. And so this is our biggest fundraiser, and this is the one that this year we were showing the community the truck that we were getting and going to be working on to replace an older truck. And that sort of imagery really helps drive the community to make sure that we are well funded. And we also will do fundraising for a specific family, either in the community or somehow connected to our community. And this year we managed to raise $5,000 for a family whose child was really sick and needed the help. And the next big focus for the community is our school. We are one of the few in the area to have our own school, as many of the smaller towns have consolidated into one or just go to another local school. And so being in Texas, one of the biggest things we have is our athletic department, and there is a lot of community support for these students, and that has really increased in the last couple of years when our school got its Facebook page and is able to share current news from sporting events to the community. We've also had students in the past few years go to the high school All-Star Bowl, and a couple cheerleaders that have been on the cheer team there as well. In the past year and a little bit in the one before, there's also been a big push to make sure our academics are up and pushing past expectations that people had for this small town. There have been some grant-funded trips to DC for the elementary students, which I was super jealous of when I heard about that. There's also been a push from the art teacher to get students making art and then showing it either in the school or at a Region 12 event. And elementary teachers have also gotten their students doing projects and then presenting them in their classes and also at school board community meetings. And so we are really hoping to push past what people think a small town student can achieve and to make sure that our students are more prepared for college than when I graduated. Now, keep all that I just told you in mind. Think about the work that our fire department does, the push our school has been doing, these amazing students that are doing the best that anyone could have ever hoped for coming out of Chilton. Just keep that in mind as we move to the next slide. This is what our downtown looks like now. It is so bare. It is not what it used to be. And this is the view that people have if they drive through Chilton. Further beyond this, there are a few houses and you can see the football field, but this is the downtown. What should be the hub of any small town is no longer a place you can go. And so if you had not seen the pictures from before and had not heard about this, if this was all you saw, you would not think that there is something worthwhile in this town. And that is why I did this research. That is what has been the most important to me. That is what I want to change for my small town and for other ones around Texas and the United States. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to this. This project has obviously been very personal for me, and being able to work on it over the semester and hear what my other classmates have been working on has been a really great experience. And I am so glad that we all managed to do this and show off some amazing research. Thank you again.